Hey guys, Julian here. My studio is still a mess, but today I'm going to be showing you how to make disco, house style music in the style of Todd Terje. You guys have been asking for this one for a minute, and it's here. As usual, you can get the full project file, samples, MIDI, presets, everything like that from this video right at the top of the description on my Bandcamp. And if you're patient on my Patreon, check there because it's already available. And let's get started. Alright, so here's the project file. We're at 120 BPM, so a little bit slower than house. This is why I kind of call it disco. I think it's a little bit more kind of like chill, just groovy stuff as opposed to like super upbeat house. But the first sound we have here is the bass. So here's the MIDI. As you can see, I'm jumping to the MIDI first, and this is something that I want to preface with this video, is that, a lot of times with these style of tracks, it's hard to get it exactly the same as it was on the record, because the truth be told, a lot of those sounds are kind of like one-time sounds, You're not really going to be able to just recreate those super easily for a video like this. But what we can talk about are the music theory concepts behind it, and sort of how that really actually fuels the sound a lot more than like, having the perfect analog synth and like, what preamp did they run it through and what mixing board did they use. Like, that stuff doesn't matter as much as a lot of people think. You'll see, like, when I talk about the stuff going on in the MIDI here, what I'm talking about. So, the first thing to note here is this is actually a very simple bass line. It's just this very bouncy, just but it's following just the chord progression of the track, which is a very simple pop chord progression. This is in a lot of pop songs, especially recently. But something that you notice here is that it's a very dynamic progression. Like, it's jumping between chords very quickly. Like, the way it's going, this is literally just a half note on one chord. Like, if we held this out a lot longer, like, let's say this was like 1 bar or even worse, like 2 bars, like, you wouldn't have the same kind of like very playful, upbeat feel in the track. So that's something that you want to keep in mind, is like, this is when I say, like, it's not always about having the perfect analog synth that they use and like all that gear stuff. Like, it doesn't really get you as far as like really figuring out like, okay, if I change the chords really quickly, it's gonna add to that kind of like very, fun, bouncy, almost sort of like 80s, 70s sort of feel that you're going for, rather than, again, just like worrying about having the perfect preamp or synth. Like, you notice how like it plays these really quickly, and then it hangs on the G sharp major a lot longer. So like, and that's really just the overall chord progression of the track as well. But it kind of gives you a little bit more tension when it sits on that for a little bit longer there. So that's something to keep in mind, that again, like, not always about the sound, it really is about the MIDI that's being played, and then the sound just kind of serves that. So you can see the sound here is this pretty simple analog patch. We just have some noise and then a saw wave. The thing with this is, like, I noticed I tried to do 2 waveforms here, and like, you can do that, but a lot of times it's actually better to just get 1 oscillator and just make that sound really fat rather than have 2. Because if you have 2 in here, you can actually start to get kind of muddy. And like, you have the phases moving around. It just doesn't really sound as good as like, just for this little like plucky bass at least, to just have the 1 oscillator and then the noise on top of it. They're going into a low pass filter just with an envelope. Got the amp envelope set pretty similar. And then here we just have some drum bus. It is a good way to kind of add some character to this. Again, I'm focusing more on like what we can do with the Ableton stuff rather than. But it works really well to just make this bass pretty fat, because obviously just like 1 saw wave coming out of analog can be kind of thin sometimes, but this just kind of boosts that. And then we just have it sidechained a little bit to the kick, not too much, but just to kind of give it a little bit more movement and to keep it under control. Then we have this arp, which is really simple. It's just following the chord progression as well. And this is just kind of adding some background movement. It's just like this arpeggiator here, which is making it go dun 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 dun, just up the octave. But it adds a nice movement to the track, like I said. Like, if I turn it off, and then I turn it on, just having that little dun 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 dun. You know, it's these little background layers that actually do add a lot to the track, and they're really important, so that's why you don't want to forget stuff like this. It's just this little analog patch where we have a square wave and a saw wave. I believe actually, no, it's not a pulse wave, but I have a little bit of noise in there as well, and then the slow pass filter with the envelope. The amp envelope is like that. I have this EQ here, so basically what we're doing is we're saturating it. And you can see I don't have the drive up, but we're using this medium curve. And then the EQ here is just going into that. It's this thing I've been talking about a lot recently, where it's like, you know, distortion is just based on how much signal is going into it. That's how distorted it'll be, essentially. It's all relative. So you can use an EQ before the saturation here to kind of shape that. So like we can boost this mid-range to kind of bring that out a little bit, and then we can cut out the lows so it's going to be less muddy. Like if I turn that off, you kind of get that like boomy, like doom, 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 doom. But now, there's a little bit more headroom in there for the mid-range and the highs to get saturated, which is really all we want. But yeah, so this medium curve saturation here is really good. Like if I turn this off, and then on again, you know, it just gives it like a nice like fullness. And then we just have the sidechain a little bit. Then we have the chords. So you can see, here's the actual chord progression in full. So what I've done here is, this is kind of the way I used to voice chords like this a lot in the past, and I still do this now, but I haven't done it in videos a lot recently, where essentially, these are just basic major and minor triads. Like I said, this is just F sharp major, A sharp minor, G sharp major, F sharp minor, or F minor. But then what we're doing here is we've taken actually the middle note, which would usually be these. Like if we put those down an octave, that would usually be the middle note, but we just put those up an octave. It's just kind of a nice way to voice it. It makes it feel a little bit more like futuristic. And you can kind of hear the voices a little bit better because they're more spread out. Versus down there, it's a little bit more muddy. And then what we've also done up here is we've added a droning note. So in this case, it's pretty much like the root note of this key that we're in, because we're in A sharp minor. Even though it starts on F sharp major, with this type of progression, usually you would actually be in the minor key. Or at least that's how I wrote like the lead and stuff like that. Like usually, you know. Especially if you're doing a more dancey track. So what I've done here is that's just playing the root note, and then it goes down to the minor 7th there. But it's just kind of like having that droning note over top. It adds something nice to the chords that I think like is missing if you don't add it. And then I've just turned down the velocity on those because I had it all the way up like the other ones, and it was just a little bit too loud. You have to kind of blend this. For the sound, this one is made with wavetable. So what we're doing here is we have a square wave and then a saw wave. So kind of like the full spectrum. And then we have this low pass filter here with, you can see, a pretty high resonance. We're going for like a more analog synth sort of sound. I've got the amp envelope on that. I like to use the amp envelope for the filter envelope because it kind of makes the synth feel more together. Like if you just have the amp envelope set like this, and then you do the filter envelope like this, you know, it's not really going to be the same thing. It's going to be kind of weird. But this way, it's very, like, fluid. And it makes your sounds very clean. It's a good sound design tip. And then I just have the unison on here. A little bit of reverb. You don't want too much. Like, just this short reverb is really good because it gives it that stereo width and that space. But it's not just going to be like, vroom. Like, if I turn that up. You know, maybe for the intro, but. And then we have some drum bus, so you can see again, I'm being very generous with the drum bus here, but it gives it that good kind of more analog character. It's a good way to get that in the computer, and that's what I'm trying to show you guys. Again, like, not necessarily this is exactly how they did it on the record, but this is how you can do it. And how I would approach this as well. And then we just have a high pass filter, because you don't want this to get in the way of the lows. And then the last synth we have here is the lead. this lead, what's happening here is it's essentially a combination between the MIDI working with the filter automation. You can see the lead is actually pretty simple. Like again, we're just using this A sharp minor scale. So you can see like A sharp, C sharp, which is the minor third, G sharp, minor seventh, F would be the fifth. That's the fourth. Another minor third. So like, just kind of following that scale, you know, you kind of want to use as few notes as possible. Like that's really the approach here. It's just like something simple, because to make something catchy, essentially, you just want to make something that doesn't have too many notes. If you have too many notes, people won't be able to remember it. But if it's really simple, people remember that stuff. That's really the main secret that I've learned to making really catchy melodies. So like, you know, I try to hang on notes when I can. Like for example, this, like, those phrases use the same notes, but it's like, just see what you can do with those notes. You don't need to go and like do like, you know, like I could have added all that stuff, but you really don't need to. Just try to like see what you can do with as few notes as possible. But then like I was saying with the filter automation, you can see that what we're doing here is I actually have that just being automated on every single note. And then I've just done a 4-bar loop here. So I just sat here and just kind of drew it out. You can see like there's these held out notes where we've done like, it's honestly almost like a melodic techno synth. Like, you guys know what I'm talking about there. But it just kind of gives the synth some life, you know? It's like, it's kind of like the idea of like drawing a picture versus like animating a cartoon, you know? This is like animating the sound, but if I just kind of like leave the filter in one spot, you can hear. The melody still works really well, but obviously, like, yeah, this just gives it, like, something really unique. That's gonna bring your track to life and make it really exciting for people, rather than just having, like, the same old synth sounds. Like, obviously, like, working with square waves and saw waves over and over can get kind of boring. Like, these are ways to kind of make it more exciting. For the sound here, we're using analog. It's just 2 square waves. I have a little bit of LFO on the pulse width of those, so that's kind of giving it some movement. And then the filter, so it's got the automation, but I also have an envelope on there with that attack there. And then just some vibrato and unison. We have a bit of echo. And then some drum bus. You'll notice I only use echo. Like a lot of times in the past, you guys have seen me use echo and reverb at the same time, or like delay and reverb. And for some sounds, that's good. But when you're doing a pretty busy track like this, where you have like 4 synths playing different things all at once, you know, to also have reverb on top of this, it's kind of asking a lot. It's like, you know, say less. Like, just have like a good echo on there that people can hear that, rather than drowning it out, because you're not really going to be able to hear the echo once you have echo and reverb on there in the whole mix. It's just kind of going to get drowned out as background noise. But this way, we just have some nice space on the sound without it getting too muddy. And then I have some drum bus. And then this is just being sidechained a little bit to the kick. And the sidechain here, it's not just to get that like pumping effect. Like obviously in like other styles of music, you would use it a little bit heavier. The thing here though, is that this actually makes it groove a lot more, because just having it kind of like pulse off of the kick like that, like the way you can see down here, it's gonna make it fit into the groove of the track a lot better. So the kick is pretty simple. You can see, yeah, we just had this short kick. So what this is, it's actually like a longer kick that I took, and then I shortened it. Like I have some, I'll show you, I have some down here where I could do this with. Like it's literally just like taking something like that, and then I'm doing the fades. Just like that, because for this track, like usually, you know, with house music, like obviously you want that like kind of like boom, like kind of a little bit more boomy kick. But I noticed when I was referencing this, like typically in these style of tracks, the kick is a little bit more of just like a, you know, like not all mid-range and high-end, but not like that big booming low-end. Just like a quick little like boom. That's just gonna add like a nice like kind of punch to the overall groove in the track, and not trying to make it like too boomy or too saturated. You can see I don't have that, just like this nice sort of like shorter, like more soft, but still just very punchy kick. I would look at like more drum machine sort of sounds, like, or again like those more sort of like short, like melodic techno style kicks. You can see I also have the tuner on here, so this is tuned to the minor third of the key actually, and the only reason for that is it doesn't really matter. Like you can kind of just tune it like to the root note. That is preferable, but what you can also do is tune it to like the fifth or the minor third or the major third if you're in a major key. But the idea here is just having it tuned to the key of the track. It's just gonna make everything a lot smoother. And the reason why we tune it to the minor third is just that was the closest note to the original note of the kick, because like I could put it down to A sharp, but you don't really have that much bass. It's just boom, boom. So if you turn it up, you know, you can preserve the original kick, but just get it to a note that will work with the key. Then we have this little bonus noise, which I'm actually going to turn up a little bit. So this is just a little background element. But you can hear it adds a lot to the beat. So this is the kind of stuff that's really important to add to your track. And a lot of times, like, you know, if you just try to go and like get like some drum machine sounds and make a little beat and make some chords, and it doesn't really add up to like what you're hearing in reference tracks and the tracks that you like, it's because this kind of stuff is missing. Like you need to have these little just like kind of background like quiet elements that are in there that are just adding something a little bit different and a little bit more like futuristic. And it's really simple. All it is it's just some white noise inside of operator, a high pass filter, and then it's being sidechained to the kick, which obviously gives it a little bit more rhythm. But then it's just a simple pattern, and we're just playing with the length of the notes. That's all it is. This is very simple, or very similar to something that you would hear in Inspector Norse. And again, it just adds like some nice background movement to the drums. Like if I play them all together, here's without this, and then with it. So it adds some nice high end, it adds some movement, and just kind of like, yeah, it works really well with the style of track. Then we have the snare clap group, which is 3 layers. So we have, this is what it all sounds like together, but we have this drum machine clap, we have a hand clap, and then we have a snare. So as you can hear, we have some panning going on. We have the one clap in the left ear and the other in the right ear. And the idea here is that the two contrasting sounds, like a hand clap, which all you have to do to record this is just record yourself clapping. Like that. Like record maybe 5 or 6 or 7 of those, and then just put them together. Like if you zoom in here, you can see. That's all this is. It's just a few different claps all together there. And then on the right, we have the drum machine clap. And then you get the punch from the snare right down the center. So that's the idea here. And this is just going to sit really well with the kick. You know, you kind of want that like even punch between them. That's how the groove works here essentially. There's also a bit of track delay going on with the hand clap to make it kind of like hit before the other ones. Like if you see how it's kind of like, that's what that's doing. But on the group of these, we just have a bit of saturation. So we're using the soft sine here. So it's kind of like the medium curve I was showing before. Like it kind of just makes it a little bit harder. I don't even have the drive turned up, but here's without it. and then with it. Really subtle, but it just gives it a little bit more kind of movement. You can also hear that little fill there. And then there's an EQ, which just kind of got a little bit of low end. You know, stuff that was just muddy, that wasn't really working well with the kick. And then we also have a bit of a high end boost there. Then we just have this high percussion. Got some reverb on that. Again, just like another simple sort of background sound that works really well with the drums to add some groove and add something unique. And then the last layer here is just this hi-hat. So it's just like adding that steady like and yeah, so that's gonna be it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. And let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Like I said in the beginning, you can get the full project files, samples, MIDI, presets, everything like that from this video right at the top of the description on my Bandcamp. This really helps support me. It is also available on my Patreon if you're a patron. Thank you so much, everybody, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.